Now, good afternoon, everybody. We'll get started now. So, I'd like to thank you for joining us for the second of our autumn winter series of the ETC Network Lunchtime Information Session. I would also like to wish you all a happy European Week of Regions and Cities. I hope that you all managed to attend some of the online sessions that have been taking place this week. For those of you who were not at our September session, my name is Anya Whelan, and I am an EU Projects Officer with the Southern Regional Assembly, and I facilitate the ETC network along with my colleague Lisa Moran, and I will be your moderator for today's session. So apologies if some of this is information that some of you already heard in the previous session, but to all our new attendees at an ETC network event, the ETC network is a forum for ETC project officers in EU programs and projects, or those interested in EU projects, particularly in the southern region, to learn, share, experience, and network with each other. Just a few points on housekeeping before we get started. As a participant, you are muted and your camera is turned off during the event. However, we welcome your questions. You will notice at the top of your screen, there's a Q&A tab that will provide you with the option to ask questions to today's speakers. I will be moderating the Q&A function and will approve your questions as they come in. You're welcome to ask questions throughout today's speaker's presentation, and then I will pose the questions to our speaker in the dedicated Q&A section after the presentation. If you are having any problems with using this function or your device does not support it, you can ask your questions through the chat function. But if you can, we please would ask you to use the dedicated Q&A function. And most of all, we encourage you to ask questions. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. However, any questions not answered will be collected from the question box and they will be directly addressed with our presenter, and we'll forward you on a response as soon as possible. If you do happen to experience any technical problems, such as not being able to hear today's speaker, please let us know in the chat box, which my colleague Anna is monitoring. Today's session is being recorded, and along with the slides from today's presentation will be sent to you after the event. So, without further ado, I am delighted to welcome today's speaker, Sarah Davoren. Sarah is an EU executive with the Southern Regional Assembly and is the national contact point for Interreg Northwest Europe. She is responsible for potential applicants across the Republic of Ireland, who she supports to get involved in consortia, make matches, and get ideas funded. While currently working with the EU cohesion funding for regional development, Sarah has over 15 years of experience working in EU funds in a variety of sectors, from research to regional and global development aid. Sarah is going to present to us today on developing a successful partnership and stakeholder group for your EU project. So I will hand the floor over to you now, Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to just share my slides. Hello, everyone. So hopefully this is coming on screen now for everyone.
Yep, we can see that perfectly, Sarah.
Great, thanks, Sonia. So look, yes, Sarah Davoren, I'm the national contact point for Interreg Northwest Europe funding. And I am working with the Southern Regional Assembly in Waterford. So if you ever need to reach out to us, you know where we are. And yeah, be happy to meet any of you on a one-to-one, maybe to discuss project ideas and so on. So today, nice and informal, we're just going to go through a few of the key pointers. So these topics, as Anya was explaining, were identified by the people working in EU funding in the southern region as topics of importance and where there was some need for more information. So we decided to look at them in particular, and one of the topics highlighted was partnerships and how to build a successful partnership and get the right stakeholder groups for your EU project. So I'm going to take you through that today. The way I thought I'd do a quick presentation, and then we'll have a chance for a bit of answering questions. So first of all, just have a quick look at building a consortium. What are the different partner types? Very brief look at the eligibility, the legal stuff, and then a little bit around the concept of stakeholders and their role, and then some examples of building a consortium, and finally a look at what is called the horizontal principles, and that's around human rights equality, including gender, people living with disabilities, and so on. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. So we'll just get going. So the first aspect of building a successful partnership and looking at stakeholders inclusion is building your consortium, of course. So what I always say to people when they come for the Interreg Northwest Europe funding is, where you start is you think of your own project idea and what you want to achieve. And the first question you ask yourself is, who do I need involved to make this project a success? So who do I really need to make this happen? And a way to help you think more holistically can be to use what we call the quadruple helix. So as you can see on that slide there, the quadruple helix is essentially 4 different areas of society. So we have, the public around the local, national, regional authorities. They have roles around policy making, and they tend to have some power. Can be government, can be local, county council, and so on. Then you have the research aspect. So universities, technical universities, or more established universities in the research field. They can be private, they can be public, could even be schools or education training boards or training centres. And then the next aspect of the quadruple helix is the private. So here you'd be most welcome to have SMEs, small to medium enterprises, business support organizations, chambers of commerce, and so on, membership networks. And then on the other side, we have the public and what we call sectoral organizations or NGOs. So in here, you might also have representative membership networks similar to the private, but they might be for more civil society or voluntary sectors, community groups, citizens groups, even lobby organizations. So for example, not-for-profit lobby organizations like patients organizations within the health sector. So you just have to think about your project idea, whatever area it happens to be in, and who you need to make your project happen. We recommend that you try and be selective. So you don't necessarily need someone from a partner from each of the 4 areas, but you think whether it might be helpful to make sure that your project can happen, first of all, in the short term, meaning the project itself, and secondly, in the longer term, what will happen when the funding stops with your project? Which partners do you need on board to ensure that your project can have a life beyond the funding? That's very important in EU funding in general, and especially in ETC or Interreg funding. So, and then how do you do that? Well, look, we recommend that you use, first of all, you're probably the best placed person yourself to know who's needed. And you oftentimes, depending on where you're working and what your idea is, you probably already know your own network and who's who within that world. Especially in Ireland, it's kind of a small operating environment. But there are other ways. So you can also look at previously funded projects, and you can see who worked on a similar project in the past or in a thematic area. You might reach out to some of those partners. Another recommendation that I give to partners is to prepare a 1-page document of your project idea, what you want to do, how it fits to that fund, and what you need partners for. And you can just use that 1-page document to circulate or to have chats with potential project partners. And that way they'll understand what you want from them, and they'll be able to see quickly if they could feel like a good fit, if they'll get something from your project. Number 4 on the slide there is get in touch with your Interreg contact points. So I am the national contact point for all the counties in Ireland for Interreg Northwest Europe funding, and the other Interreg funds have different contact points. So for example, the Atlantic area, its funding is Travis O'Doherty. The Northern Periphery and Arctic is also Travis. And then for the URBACT funds, it's Carl Murphy. So you can find on the different funding websites, you'll have the name of the national contact point. National contact point can help you, especially if you have that 1-pager, to reach out to international contacts, and they'll use their equivalents in the other countries to help you identify a suitable partner. Number 5 is also a very good idea, being proactive on these matching platforms. A lot of the different funds have a matching platform where you kind of upload your organization CV and what type of project you'd like to be involved in. People might reach out to you, and you can reach out to others that are interested in going for EU funding together. And then the last point there is the keep.eu database. And that is a really interesting website where you have all the ever funded Interreg projects. You can filter by thematic area, and you can see which partners were involved in all the different projects. So that can be really useful for just kind of seeing who's been funded before, they have experience, they've had a success in the past, and they might be interested in working with you on your project idea. The next bit, so yeah, I was just talking there a little bit about the matching platforms, so just go a bit more on that. So the idea of these matching platforms is that it can help you find international partners in particular. You can sometimes put up your project abstract idea, and you can browse other abstracts for ideas or posters to see if you'd be interested in joining another project. Interreg Northwest Europe, the link is here, and we're going to share these slides with you afterwards, so you'll have all the links to the different platforms of the matching. Interreg Northwest Europe certainly allows you to upload the abstract, see the partners, you can filter for the type of partner, whether you want them to be public, NGO, private, SME, and you can also filter for the topic of the project ideas that are available. And if you upload your idea, you can put up your keywords, and then, it's very easy to find a project that you might find interesting. And it's interesting as well, of course, to see what you might call competitors. So they might have a project idea in a similar field. So you can just see what they're doing. Are you overlapping? Should you merge the two ideas? Would you have a better chance of being funded if you did? So yeah, it's just good to have a feel for who else is applying to the fund at the same deadline. Interreg Europe, they don't have such an interactive opportunity to upload your project abstract like Interreg Northwest Europe, but they do have a very good partners database that you can go in and get contacts in that sense. Similar for Atlantic area, they have a good partners database, and the link is there. Northern Periphery and Arctic, as far as I know at the moment, don't have anything. But again, it's a smaller pool, so you might be better off in that one going directly to the contact point in Ireland. His name is Travis O'Doherty. And again, we can get you those contact informations if you need on the website of Northern Periphery and Arctic, you'll find them too. The Wheel, haven't mentioned them yet, but they're a very useful organisation, especially for civil society, so NGOs and the community and voluntary sector. So like smaller local development groups find the Wheel very helpful. Also local authorities, if I'm honest. So the Wheel, they are responsible for what's called Access Europe funding, and the purpose of Access Europe is to help these type of players understand opportunities, what's the right project funding fit for them. We're going to have Emma Murta from the Wheel speaking in December, I think, at one of these ETC networks. So that might be an interesting one for you to attend if you're from the community and voluntary sector. And they have a really interesting partners database that you can search as well, quite detailed with the Irish partners. And that can be interesting for the local authorities that are looking for more community voluntary sector expertise in their consortium in Ireland. So you can, even if you're Irish, you can go to that Wheel database and find a suitable Irish partner in a very specific topic in a very specific county, for example. So it's really a great wealth of data there. So that's all the different ways you can kind of search for your partner. So now I'm going to move on a little bit to more technical side, which is the names on all these different types of partner. So again, as you know, in the European funding world, they have a lot of jargon. So it is important though to understand a few of the key around stakeholders and partnership. Okay, so all these funds operate on what they call a lead partner principle. And that means that the lead partner is responsible for the whole consortium. They're responsible for submitting the application form, responsible for receiving the payments, and responsible for the reporting during the life of the project. So all the different funds have the lead partner principle. And then under the lead partner, you have the full partners. They receive money, they have responsibility for tasks, and they are also responsible for reporting up to the lead partner. Then in some of the funds, and I have them listed there, the Interreg ones, Northwest Europe, Northern Periphery and Arctic, and Atlantic area, they have what we call associated organizations. They provide advice. They can be experts in a field, but they don't want to be involved in the project. They don't want any EU money. They don't want to do any reporting, but you need them for their expertise and their knowledge. So sometimes this would be a government department where all they do really is maybe come to some of your meetings or check some of your reporting to see if you're on the right track, and they might be interested in the outcome of the project. And then in the last 3 bullets there, you see types of partners that are listed in the application form for Interreg Europe projects only. So sorry, I should actually say I'm assuming here that because you've attended previous ETC networks that you're familiar with all the different ETC funding types that are out there, but I might just do a quick review there. At the bottom of the slide, you can see them listed. So these are the ones that we're eligible for in Ireland. Not exhaustive because I've missed out Urbact. So we have Interreg Northwest Europe, that's the one I work for. Interreg Northern Periphery and Arctic, that kind of covers the Nordic countries, Greenland, Iceland, and Ireland. Atlantic area, that covers kind of Ireland, France, Spain, Portugal. And then Interreg Europe, which covers pretty much the whole European Union, but you need a partner from the different north, south, east, west kind of division of the areas. And then you have, not listed here, but you also have Urbact, which is for projects around cities and urban development. So we have all those different types of funding, and each of them have their own kind of rules. So I highly recommend that you consult the program manual for whichever fund you're applying to. That's, one of the first things you'll be doing is deciding which fund suits you for your project idea. You'll have to make sure you download the right program manual. It can easily happen that you're applying to Interreg Northwest Europe by accident. You have the Interreg Europe program manual and you're getting a bit confused with the terminology because it's slightly different. So yeah, please just check once you've decided which fund you want to go for. So then linked to the partner types, we have partner eligibility. The first check that you'll have to do is whether your lead partner is profit making. So for most of these consortia, and again, you have to check your program manual for the fund you're applying to, but as a general rule, the lead partner cannot be profit making. So they can be public, definitely, no problem. And they can even be private, as in, private foundation. But the important thing is that they're not for profit if they're private. The next thing you need to check is, do you have the right geographic coverage? That differs per fund, as I explained there in the last slide. Different types of program have different geographical target areas. The third one that you need to check is whether the partners that you're inviting are correctly registered. So do they have a proof of address and a bank account in the country that's in the territory that's eligible? In Ireland, it's actually been a bit of an issue recently where, because of Brexit, there's been some organisations that have quickly tried to re-register in Ireland, but they haven't managed to have proof of address yet or set up their bank account, and it's just taking time for them. So yeah, you just really need to try and get those things in order. Make sure that you have proof that they are living in the members, that the organisation is really based in the member state. Number 4 and 5 covers those smaller private partners. Another thing that we check at the eligibility phase is the solvency of those smaller organizations. Normally they might be smaller private not-for-profit, so for example a community group, an NGO, a small to medium enterprise, or a very small micro enterprise. And what they do there is they ask for 2 years of annual accounts, and that's just to see if there's a little bit of cash flow so that your organization will be able to survive if there's any delay in the project output, because these funds typically pay once your project has delivered, then you receive the money. So you need a bit of time where you can pay, we're sure that you can pay your staff salaries to get the work, keep it going. The risk is, of course, that if one of those little partners was unable to keep the cash flow going and they went bankrupt, well, then the project might fail. So they want to avoid this from the get-go by asking for these solvency documents. And then just a quick comment on the co-funding. A lot of these Interregs require a percentage of your own money to match the EU funding coming in. So for example, in Interreg Northwest Europe, the EU will give you 60% of the money that you need to do your project, and you yourself must bring 40%. And you can bring that 40% maybe from another grant from a local authority, or maybe by reorganizing the staff salaries that you already have covered. There can be some implications here, in particular for those private partners. Normally it's fine for the public, but again, those private and especially any profit-making partners, you just need to check that they're not receiving 100% public funding, as in that their match is also coming from a public grant, because there's issues there that get complicated around state aid and other legal implications. So we can always help you. The national contact points can help you check things like this before you submit. If you have any doubts, you can just come to us, and usually there's a way around. So again, check the program manual for the relevant fund that you're going to. Okay, so look, we'll get into the stakeholders and the concept. So you need your stakeholders during the whole lot of the project. So you need it during the rollout of the project and during the long-term effects. And you need to be looking at various levels. So I just thought I'd run through them here, real basic. So the first is your full partners in your project. So your lead partners and your full partners that you invite into your consortium. They can be full partners, or they could even be those advisory partners that associated partners that give you tips on how to improve, but they don't receive any EU money. So these are in the project, these are the partners, and they are, although they're in the project, they're also still your stakeholders, you know, especially the advisory ones. They might be the end user and so on. So you need to be sure you're consulting with them. The next is the target groups. So who your project will reach out to during the project. So for communications, for awareness raising, maybe you want to do a bit of training for behavior change. So you just need to think through who you're targeting with the project. They don't all have to be in it as receiving EU funds, but they might be members of the public that you want to target. And then finally, the wider stakeholder group. And this, of course, can be anyone who's impacted by or who's an interest in any of your project's rollout and results. So it's really a wide understanding of stakeholders, and you're the only one who can decide who these people are at each level. I thought I'd give you an example for what a typical consortium would maybe look like, and how you'd maybe think about who to include in your project. So I'll just run through here a real basic example. So you have a very typical Interreg project, ETC, by the way, synonym for Interreg, design. So you have your lead partner and you have 3 full partners from 3 different countries. That'd be a very basic, typical design. And then you might have some associated organizations giving those partners advice on how to do the project. And then, so that's your consortium, that's who's involved. And then you have your project design. So what are these people doing? You might have your overall objective, and then you might have, say, 3 specific objectives within that overall objective. And those 3 specific objectives, let's, for simplification, equal 1 work package each. And those work packages must deliver outputs and results per work package. And the idea behind all of these Interreg funds is that the outputs and the results, they really lead to a change in society, an impact in the countries where they're happening, and a better opportunities in life for the citizens of those countries. So when you're building your consortium, so you have it there, your project is the overall objective, your specific objectives, each of them representing 1 work package and leading to the outputs and results and leading to societal change in the countries. So at each level, what we would suggest you do is have a think for each work package. You know, what are the activities that you want to do here in this work package? So it might be communications, training, building. Who are you targeting with those activities? Who's going to actually do the work? And that typically would be the full partners because they're receiving money to do the work. Who needs to provide advice? Again, at short term during the project, and then for the longer term after the project, how to ensure it continues, and consider the risks and what you might do to mitigate against the risks. So for each of these work packages, you might have a think about who you need to answer these questions. So we have an example here, and this can help you to think about who you need in your partnership and in your stakeholder groups. So the example is to develop and roll out an app for a real-time public transport in, say, rural areas where you just never know where there's going to be a bus, and it could be once every 3 hours. So, first of all, what are your activities? You want to develop and roll out this app. Who are you targeting with the activities? Number 2 there. So for in rural areas, you might be targeting pupils going to school, workers going to their offices, their factories, and maybe the elderly trying to get around. Who's going to do the work? So the project partner is going to do the work on this app in rural areas. Perhaps a local authority would be a good project lead on this because they're generally responsible for public transport. Who needs to advise? That question number 4 there, in the short and the long term. So if you're going to be targeting school pupils, you might want to discuss with the schools themselves, the pupils, parents associations, for example, citizens groups, older people, digital privacy experts, because you're dealing with an app and GDPR. You might also need to want to discuss generally with all the potential end users, what are their needs, what are their wants, what would be the barriers to them using your app. And finally, what could be the risks and mitigations to the use of this app? So, for example, older people don't want to use an app. So you ask them, what would help you to use the app, or what else could we do so that you have access to public transport in rural areas? And hopefully by including all these voices, you will really make that societal change and have that impact in the local area, in the country. Linked to that is the horizontal principles. Now, this is something that's included in nearly all the Interreg. There's like a section in the application form around horizontal principles. And what it's looking to ensure is that all projects comply with the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights and the Common Provision Regulations on horizontal principles. And what they ask you to do is consider how your project might have consequences, whether intended or unintended, on, for example, sustainable development and impact on the environment. That's called the do no significant harm principle. And then, of course, also on equal opportunities and non-discrimination around sex, racial, ethnic origin, religions, disability, age, sexual orientation, and so on. So whether your project you really have to examine whether your project could have an impact here. And an important way of doing that is through the stakeholders. Equality between men and women is also an important and highlighted horizontal principle actually in the reporting phase. So they're looking to see how projects promote equality between men and women and prevent discrimination. So the horizontal principles, as I just mentioned, essentially it's all about the inclusion of people, and people is stakeholders. And this can really help you in terms of risk and mitigation for your project. So, including your stakeholders is vital so that your project actually works usually. So we have a real life example here that we came across quite recently. Another app. So a lot of these projects are developing apps. So this was an app to help older people in remote and rural areas access their GP care, so medical family doctor care for a specific illness. So the project consortium, they worked a lot with doctors, with hospitals, and with the tech companies to design the app. So that's all great, all the right stakeholders. The tech company ran focus groups with elderly people. So that's great, but they ran them in their own city where they were based. And this project is targeting remote rural areas. And when they went to roll out the app, they realized that the digital literacy amongst the elderly in these remote rural areas was much lower than in the city where they'd done the testing. And basically the older people were unable or unwilling to use the app. So it didn't really work out as a project. Now, there's lots of reasons around that: access to internet, broadband, and just generally knowing how to use the technology. It can differ between socioeconomic status and where you are in the country, and the rural or the urban divides. So there's a lot to consider. And if they had maybe taken the time to just talk with their different stakeholder groups, that might have been ironed out from an earlier stage in the project, and it could have had a much better outcome. So yeah, as they, this typical slogan, nothing about us without us. So yeah, include your stakeholders and your project will have much better chance of success. So in terms of the horizontal principles, which explain, they go from environmental all the way to disability, gender, inclusion. There's lots of support available and inspiration for you if you want to have a look. The European Commission itself has its own websites especially around the environmental impact assessment. There you have the National Disability Authority in Ireland has a really good website helping you, giving you tips on how to design communications materials so that they're accessible to target groups, how to even reach those target groups, people living with disabilities. We have the EARN-ACT research for women in European cooperation projects, which is very nice information and recommendations for the staff working on the EU projects, which is a bit different again to your target groups and your wider community. And then, of course, the universities in Ireland and the research organisations tend to be very ahead. They have a lot of really great guidance. A lot of them are accredited with Athena Swan and so on, and they know an awful lot about how to ensure gender equality and inclusion in research world. And then again, gender and entrepreneurship and inclusion and disabilities and so on in entrepreneurship and anti-discrimination. Enterprise Ireland have done a lot of work and they have a lot of toolkits available. So on this slide, each of those images has a link. And again, we'll be sharing them with you if you want to have a look, but just do your own Google and you'll find pretty quickly that in Ireland, we have lots and lots of resources if you want to take a look. So now I'm just going to take the time, if you please allow me at the end, to just explain a little bit Interreg Northwest Europe. So I'm the national contact point for this particular fund. It's just one of the many that are available in Ireland. I'm going to ask my colleague there to please put just the link to sign up to the mailing list into the chat. So I have a mailing list and you can sign up, put in your keywords, and this will allow me to find you when I'm approached by other international organisations that are looking for Irish partners with a particular type of expertise. So they might come to me and be like, look, Sarah, we really need a partner in Ireland that has access to patient organisations around dementia. And I'll be able to put into my keyword database and find you if you're working in that particular area. Or it could be something completely different, working in seafood product development, and wide and varied scope. So please sign up to that mailing list. It will help me to find you and I can send you opportunities and invitations to join other consortia. Another way you can do is please make that little one-pager of your project idea and we can set up a little meeting and have a chat through the idea and see does it fit for Interreg Northwest Europe priority areas, which you can see on our website. There's also a more generic newsletter that goes to all the different countries run by RJS. There's a link in this slide that we'll be able to share. The community applicant platform that we mentioned earlier, that's like the matching platform that you can sign up for. Again, the link is here. And I'd also like to invite anyone who's interested to join us in Paris for the Project Ideas Forum. So that's taking place in December, early December. And what we're doing there is we're promoting our next upcoming call 4. It will be open soon with the information on how to apply coming in November with a deadline in probably February of 2024. And what you can do in Paris is it's a great opportunity. It's kind of like a university conference where people come with their project idea. They have it printed out on a poster and you can walk around the posters and leave your business card or have a chat with the owner of the project. And they might invite you to join their project consortium. And likewise, you can bring and present your own poster of your project idea and you might find your partners there to make your idea happen. So look, the registration is open now. There's a link there to register until the 23rd of November and the actual event will be in Paris on 7th of December. Again, on the Interreg Northwest Europe website, you will find the registration link as well. So look, that's it for me for the moment. Thank you for your time. There's my email. Please feel free to get in touch and I encourage you to sign up to the Irish Partners mailing list that was in the chat. So thanks, Anya, over. I can't see the chat, so I don't know about the questions.
Now, thank you very much for that, Sarah. That was a really informative presentation with some really brilliant advice on developing a successful partnership and stakeholder group for your EU project. And as mentioned previously, and Sarah mentioned it in her presentation, we'll share Sarah's presentation with you after this event and also provide you with upcoming ETC call deadlines that may be of assistance to you, any resources that Sarah mentioned in her presentation, and maybe as well the contact details to those national contact points, as mentioned by Sarah, because they really are your key with these different programs, along with the program manual, as stated by Sarah. So we'll now move to the Q&A portion of this session. If you haven't already asked a question, please do use the Q&A function or the chat function, as I said, if you're having any problems with the Q&A button, and I can then pose the questions to Sarah. So Sarah, we do have a couple of questions in already, but maybe just to get the ball rolling, I might just pose a question to you myself, so something that just came through your presentation. So I know you spoke about horizontal principles and explained them really, really clearly, because I think it's an area that people do, that they're really aware of and they want their project to be in line with them, but it's just getting their head around them. But I suppose for a project officer, how could they address, say, those issues around gender, inclusion, people with disabilities, if their project doesn't have anything to do with those topics? So would you have any advice on that?
Yes, yeah. So look, this is really common. It's a lot of the language is new for people, and it's increasingly an important indicator for the European Commission. So it's really something that we can no longer continue to ignore. And it's not that people or projects intentionally want to exclude anyone. It's just that it might not occur, and it hasn't traditionally been part of the design process to consider all the different parts of society that your project might impact. So look, my main advice is to look at it in two ways. So the first way is internally, and second kind of externally. So from internally, as a first step, you can certainly consider how the staff working on your project might be affected by the fact that this EU project is funded. So a research group in Donegal, actually, EarnAct, Letterkenny Institute of Technology, as it was back then as well, they're linked, did some interesting research, and they on all the different EU projects that have been funded and the roles of women in particular within those projects. And so I suppose the main outcome of that, and a recommendation to any project, is just when you're designing from the beginning and you're designing your work packages and your specific objectives, are you giving opportunities to women or minorities in general in your project to take leadership roles? So for example, that EarnAct research showed that women are indeed the majority staff in EU funded projects. However, they tend not to be in senior roles, such as the work package leader or the overall coordinator. They are heavily represented in communications, in project management, and in finance administration. So, that's the first step that you could do. Are you offering that postdoc or that PhD student the opportunity to become a work package leader? And another simple step, low-hanging fruit for the project and the consortium staff internally, is to ensure that all the project staff are aware of bias, unconscious bias, equality laws, legislation, and so on. And in Ireland, there's a very easy way to do this. If there's an online e-learning from the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission that you can complete for free. It takes about 3 hours, so you could straight away get all your staff to do that. And you're just, increasing awareness and just being conscious, a different way of thinking as the staff roll out the project. So that's kind of internally to the consortium. The second way, and this is more related to today's discussion on the stakeholder groups and the partners, look, it's not necessarily your job to know all the ways that your project might impact positively or negatively on different parts of the population, but it's your job to ask and to consult. So whatever the project type, you might invite representatives to give their input to the design and planning. So they're the experts and they know the issues and the barriers to inclusion. Someone living in using a wheelchair, they'll let you know pretty quickly all the different barriers they might face. So you might think that your project has nothing to do with people in minorities or people with disabilities or race or inclusion of ethnic minorities and so on. But, for example, a product development project, developing a product from algae, focusing on SMEs, it might seem very scientific and nothing to do with human rights and equality. But what they might do is they might consult with women in business representatives or people with disabilities in business. And their feedback could be something simple to do with the time of day that you're holding these meetings to promote how to work with algae products, or ensuring that the information and opportunities for small to medium enterprises is shared in various formats, not only digitally. And you can also work very easily through different membership groups or the different chambers of commerce or IBEC and so on. A lot of them have subgroups for women in business or for people with disabilities working in business with their own companies. So yeah, sorry, I went on a bit of a rant there, Anya, but there's lots of ways, nearly any project, it's relevant.
Definitely. And I think your advice there of starting right from the design phase is really, really important. That's a consideration from the very start, and it's building the foundation of your project is really, really useful. And some of those resources you mentioned, or even the reports we might share with attendees afterwards as well. Okay, thank you very much for that, Sarah. So I'll go to now the questions that we have from our attendees. So we have a question here, Sarah. Can we get a project management company, such as consultants, as a full partner?
Oh, yeah. So this is a common one. So for Interreg Northwest Europe anyway, and I think the others, private and public entities are all eligible, no problem. So consultancy being a private profit-making company, there's no problem for them to be involved, indeed, as a partner. But the issue in Interreg Northwest Europe is that where their only role is project management, they're not eligible. So they would have to be, so consultants that are only doing project management, they'd have to be included under external expertise in the budget, so not as a full partner. I check the other fund manuals, but I imagine they're very similar. Full partners on a project can do project management, but they'd need to be doing more than just that. Often the lead partner would take on that job in addition to other more technical work that they might be doing. And actually, the recommendation really I would give is, depending on your organization, but if you can at all, the recommendation is to use this funding to hire staff as project managers, because this builds your organization's capacity for winning and for managing EU funds into the future. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. So the next one we have there is, do we need to have the wider stakeholders involved at the application stage? So right from the very early, when you're building your project and writing your application, should you be engaging with your stakeholders at that point?
Yes, always wise to include your stakeholders from start of the project. In the design phase, you need your stakeholders to make sure your project can happen in the first place. And they're vital to ensure that the project can have a life beyond the funding. So again, read the program manual, and the requirements to apply. Interreg Europe funds in particular require closer work with stakeholder groups. So yeah, I would certainly recommend that, yeah.
Perfect. And I know we're a little bit caught for time, but this very last question here, Sarah, would you have any advice with how to encourage industry to become stakeholders in EU projects? I do know that can be a challenge for some projects, is having industry or manufacturers coming in as stakeholders. They might be very important to your project, but it can be difficult to get them engaged. Do you have any advice on?
Yeah. Look, 100%, and I understand that it's a challenge and I understand their point of view, because especially if they're smaller industry players, they might have time or staff to be just working on this EU project, which doesn't bring in a lot of money for them. So look, what can you do? It's a challenge. You maybe identify industry partners that might have an interest in the outputs. So they might a type of technology or data analysis that they would then be well placed to scale up in the future due to their role in the project. So they might have it would be an investment for them getting involved with the project. Another way to get input from industry, where you don't need them necessarily to pilot, but maybe just their advice, can be to approach a national membership network that can be easier to get involved than individual companies. So for example, the Chambers of Commerce or IBEC, Irish Farmers Association is another one. They work on behalf of their members, and they have a mandate, and they have staff, crucially, that work on policies for their members. So they can be quite helpful as project partners, and often they're used to it. And another way could be to go even higher against those would be national level. You could go to an EU-wide membership group, so they can bring industry along with your project. We had a project there in biodiversity. It was the European Landowners Organization. They were very active across different countries, including Ireland. So there's different, maybe go through a network membership group. It can be easier than trying to convince a very small SME that doesn't have time or money to invest in this.
Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. That's really practical advice. And if anyone does have any follow-up questions with Sarah, maybe particular to Interreg Northwest Europe, you'll have her contact details through the slides as well. So look, thank you very much, Sarah. And I would like to thank you, the members of our ETC network, for your continued engagement and for your support in shaping the topics covered for the autumn-winter series of our lunchtime information sessions. For those of you who are not members of the ETC network, you can scan the QR code on your screen now or follow the link that Anna is going to pop in the chat now. A feedback form is going to be sent to all attendees after the event to review the event, along with slides and registration links for the remaining lunchtime sessions. And talking of the remaining lunchtime sessions, our next ETC network lunchtime session, so we have a bit longer than a month to wait, is going to be on Thursday, the 23rd of November. It'll be at the same time, and we're going to be joined by Helena Stromberg, who's a senior staff officer and communications coordinator for the EU Just Transition Fund in Ireland with the Eastern and Midland Regional Assembly. And Helena is going to give us advice on communicating our EU projects successfully, again, from the perspective of ETC or Interreg. As Sarah explained, those terms are used interchangeably. If you are not registered, you can scan the QR code there in the top right of that infographic, and Anna is going to pop it in the chat again. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Sarah again, our presenter today. I'm really, really grateful, Sarah, for you taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with our ETC network. I'd also like to thank Anna Higgins, who provided technical support in the background and in the run-up to today's event. Your support is really, really appreciated. So look, that concludes the second of our lunchtime information sessions, and hopefully a bit of time for you still to grab a little bit of lunch. I hope that you all have a pleasant rest of your day and a lovely weekend. We look forward to meeting you again at our November session. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Anya.